Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Come on in. We're going to give it just a couple of minutes so that everybody comes in. Okay. I can see them coming in now. It's great. Welcome. Welcome to the North American Expats in France Quarterly Financial Forum. This is the fourth quarter edition. And I would like to introduce our participants tonight. We have Brian Dunhill, who is a financial planner with a core emphasis on concentrated positions and retirement planning for expatriates. Past positions have led him to work in many capacities for prestigious firms on Wall Street, including UBS, Lehman Brothers, and A.G. Edwards. Working as an analyst in compliance and as a financial advisor has given him the full perspective on the operations of a financial firm. And Brian is going to be the first person to speak tonight. And before we get started, let me remind everyone that we will be recording this session and that we will be making it available so that you can watch it at another time or share it with your friends. Then I'm going to do a presentation after Brian. And after my presentation, I'd like to introduce you to Daniel Tostado, who is a French attorney, considered an avocat à la cour and a U.S. attorney at law in New York, who runs a law firm in Paris for French inbound immigration. Daniel handles French visas, residency permits, and naturalization applications. He offers both consultations on or full-on assistance, depending on the needs of each applicant. And tonight's topic is relocation and immigration for Americans moving to France, and that's why Daniel is here. So to get started, we're going to start with Brian Dunhill, and Brian, it's all yours.
Wow, that looked like a much sunnier day than it was today. Right then. Thank you, Adrian, and welcome, Daniel. Good to see you as always. Essentially, when it comes to immigration, one of the big things that I want to really highlight today are the things that you want to think about before you get into France. There's three big topics that I really want to think about from your financial aspect before you enter France, because once you enter France, you might have tax ramifications in doing so and removing them. The first big portion, a lot of people, they want to test out France. Good idea. It's a great idea, but make sure if you're going to be selling your house back in the States, you consider what the tax ramifications might be if you do so after you move to France versus before you move to France. If you sell it before you move to France, it's not subject to any French taxation, whereas once you get to France, it will be, even though it is back in the States. So if it doesn't have too big of a financial implication or it's worth the thought, consider planning that out or planning your residency in France to commence once the house has been sold. That is the one big thing. Item number two, trust. Now, in past webinars, we've talked in a big way how great the double taxation agreement is between the United States and France. You might remember the most excitable Jonathan Hadida talking about how he loves the double taxation agreement. Now, it works perfectly when things are in your name, but things are really changing in France when it comes to trust. America is a common law country. France is a civil law country. And so civil law countries don't recognize trust. They don't see it as an active utility. They used to really look right through them, and now they're questioning whether they should just look right through them to tax them, but instead potentially to tax them in France instead of the United States looking right through them. That is a big risk. We don't know how they're going to play that out, but considering that the minute you move into France, you become liable to French inheritance tax. That means avoiding US probate is not the number one priority. The number one priority is to keep into that double taxation agreement while you're living. So there's a high likelihood that you should rip up that trust and take the money out of the trust and put it in your own individual name or another means before you get to France. By the time you become resident in France, at that point in time, you might be subjecting yourself to tax. So again, talk to your accountants, talk to your attorney, or just give me a call and we can discuss your situation before you get over to France if you have any trusts. The third one is for those people that essentially intend to give a hefty amount of assets to their kids to avoid state taxes. Gifts in the United States, we have a $12.92 million exemption, and that works for both gifts or your estate. Now, France, it's much, much lower. And there's exclusions of how much you can give for gifts for long periods of time. So if you intend to give a large gift to a child to help them get on the property ladder or for university or anything of the such, doing so before you move to France is going to keep you from having a lot of headaches or potential gift taxes in France once you get there. Again, structuring and planning out multiple facets before you get over there will avoid frustration once you get over there. But those are the three big ones: your house, your trusts, and any gifts that you're going to be making. From there, you're going to have a lot of other little nuances that you want to get into, currencies and banking. So that's where I'm going to hand it over to our real estate aficionado in Adrian, and she'll talk you through how to set those up.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, I've got a short presentation on money matters for expats, and I just have to unshare and reshare my screen so that I can get my presentation up there. Here we go. Up, okay. And before I get started on this, I just want to remind everyone that you can use your Q&A to put the questions in so that we can answer those questions at the end of this session. So please do that. I see a few people have raised their hands, so we'll take care of that at the end of the session as well. And Patty Sadowskis is on, who will be monitoring those and helping us with that. So just to go through a few items, these are some of the things that you're going to have to deal with as expats coming over to a completely new system in every way, shape, and form, including currency. So when you're going from dollars to euros, our best advice is to work with a currency broker who will give you the best rate of exchange and the lowest fees for making that exchange. The banks tend to charge 3%. The currency brokers tend to charge 1% in the difference between the buy and the sell rate. And if you go onto our website, you will see 3 currency brokers that we recommend that you work with. Please let them know that we referred you. Our website is adrianleeds.com, ADRIANLEEDS. We're going to put that information at the end of the session, so you'll have it. And also, all of this information that I'm talking about today, I've written out in a very detailed way, which will be in tomorrow's French Property Insider. So if you are not subscribed to that, please do. And again, I'll have that information at the end of this session. Now, in order to open a French bank account, this is not a simple task. You cannot just walk into a bank that has a bevy of agents waiting for you to open that account. So you really need a personal introduction. This is something we do provide for our clients. Part of the problem with opening a bank account has to do with FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, that has made banking for Americans difficult worldwide. And again, in tomorrow's French Property Insider is a complete detailed explanation of that. But just know that we can help you open a bank account in France. Now, when it comes to wire transfers, The numbering system in Europe is different. You don't use a routing number and a bank account number. It's called an IBAN, and that's an international banking number. You're also going to be asked for a SWIFT code. In France, it's called a BIC, a BIC. And you're going to have to get used to learning all of these new acronyms and the way bank account numbers work. When you're handling cash, okay, as going from dollars to euros, you might notice that euros are different sizes and different colors, and you can actually tell one bill from another, and it uses lots of different coins, and they're made up, every European country has its own actual set of euros. The best way to get cash, however, is from any one of the bank's ATMs. And when you use an ATM, you can get cash out of even your US accounts. If you have a debit card, you can get cash directly in euros using your US debit card. But please do not select the option of paying in your own currency. What that means is that the bank is going to charge an extra fee if you select that option. So you want to select dollars, not euros, even though you're going to get euros out. And I certainly hope I'm not confusing anyone, because I can remember when someone asked me, were they going to get dollars out of an ATM in Europe or euros? And I was really surprised by that question, but you will get euros, and the value of dollars will come out of your US account. But you want to make that as little as possible. You want to get the best exchange rate you can. Now, the French banks do provide online banking service, just like the US banks do, but they do charge for this, and they charge for other services as well, while the US banks provide these services free of charge. So don't be shocked. It's just that they earn their money in a different way than the US banks do. So expect to spend about 10 to 15 euros per month to have a bank account, to have checks, to have online service. Okay, it's not at all unusual. In order to pay bills in France, it's actually quite easy, because they use what's called a RIB system, which means relevé d'identité bancaire, and it takes an automatic debit out of your account, which is called a prélèvement, to pay your gas, electricity, telephone, things of that nature. And you don't have to write checks. You don't have to be here for that to happen. You easily set it up so that it automatically gets paid. And it's really quite a simple and wonderful service, and it just works via your bank. Now, if you're looking to get a mortgage, it's way more difficult in France now to get a mortgage, also thanks to FATCA. Even though the rates are much lower than they are in the US, which is really great, but it is difficult to achieve. It is not impossible. We do have a mortgage broker that you can call upon that will work with you. And so I wouldn't call it impossible, but let's just say that they have very strict requirements. For example, they really don't want to work with people who are much over the age of 60, and they don't want to work with people who are self-employed. So if you are under 60 and you're salaried, then the chances are pretty good. The best way, however, to master your money, and this is what Brian was talking about from the beginning. First of all, it's called working with professionals, and he is certainly the best place to start. And with also tax advisors, so that you set yourself up in a way that's going to work best once you move to France. And as I said before, if you just read French Property Insider, tomorrow's issue, you will get all of this in tremendous detail. And on that note, I'm going to turn this over to Daniel Tostado.
Well, before you turn it over to him,
Okay.
please. Question for you guys.
Yes.
Does anybody know every banknote in euros? Since I haven't had somebody talk about banknotes in a long time, so it's your silly fun facts of the day. Every front of a euro note is always going to have either a window or a doorway, and the back is all going to have a bridge, right?
Okay.
I've just learned something, Brian.
The doors and the windows are all symbolizing openness and cooperation. And the bridges is communication with the rest of the world. And that is exactly what Daniel's doing today. He's communicating with the rest of the world of how we can get people into euros.
I had
So there's
no
your
idea.
random fact of the day on currency.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure Donald Trump designed the currency then in France. I'm not sure he's in favor of bridges so much. So yes, I am Daniel Tostado. I am running the French immigration law firm Cabinet Daniel Tostado, and I help people, as Adrian said, move here to France. For the majority of the clients that interact with Adrian, they opt for the long stay visitor visa, just known as the visitor visa, which, unlike the tourist stay, lets you be here in France for more than 90 days at a time. It lets you be in France for 365 days out of the year. It's a 1-year status. It's renewable indefinitely. After 5 years of being on this visitor status, you can get the 10-year card. And the 10-year card's really good because it gets the prefecture off your back for 10 years. And it lets you even work in France. So if a person wanted to sell art on the weekend or what have you, they could do that on this long stay visitor visa. Some of Adrian's other clients can sometimes opt for spouse of French national or spouse of EU national, depending on what their profile is. But that's my general experience of Adrian's clients. And if there are other folks that have more questions that are aligned with being an entrepreneur in France or being like a highly skilled employee in France, you can certainly redirect all your questions into the question and response of the Zoom. Oftentimes I give these kinds of presentations and it degenerates into let's ask a lot of questions and answer a lot of questions, and I'm perfectly fine with that because this is a presentation for you, so we're happy to answer your question. For that long stay visitor visa, there's generally 4 things we need to show to satisfy the prefecture to get that long stay visitor visa. It's about finances, health coverage, housing, and then the promise to not work in France. I'll focus on that first section because we're in the financial forum today. So what are they looking for on the financial side to satisfy them for the visitor visa? Interestingly enough, I would say that it is this first factor that's going to determine whether or not they say yes or no to the actual application. So you want to satisfy them on the financial side, and the threshold is very low, in my opinion. They're looking for 17,000 euros entering your accounts over the past 12 months. So 17,000 euros is the equivalency of French minimum wage net. So they're looking for you to be generally showing less than 2,000 euros a month entering your account, but collectively 17,000 euros over the past 12 months. The way that this is, and maybe you'll start to see how France operates or the French mindset, is that they say, okay, well, in France, we earn on average 2,000 euros a year. We're going to project that onto all the other nationalities and say, you must also earn 2,000 euros a year. If you can show that, then we'll let you come to the country. And that's at a pretty low threshold. So that works in our favor, that the French are always projecting onto us as Americans. And in this case, this works in our favor, especially that most American salaries are above 17,000 euros a year, that Americans that are getting pension from Social Security, that's another way of proving this. That's usually, it depends on the individual, but it can be around $2,000, $3,000 a month. So that usually already gets you over the hump. I try to be a little more cautious when I'm putting together an application for a visa for the visitor status and prove the finances by a couple different ways. So the best way is 3 months of bank statements showing that there's money entering the account regularly. It doesn't have to be regular, but that there's either a good lump sum entering the account or multiple payments entering your account. You could also back that up with a stock portfolio, like a TD Ameritrade or Charles Schwab summary page showing that you've got a nice bed of assets that you're sitting on, so that you're not going to become a burden on the system. If you have a pension, that's another way of proving this. And then for my clients that I work with, I also have them fill out a financial summary overview that says, I'm moving to France for these reasons. I want to speak French better. I want to immerse myself in French culture. I want to change my domicile, be, based out of France from here on out. And financially, I've got a job. Well, that's a different topic, but I've got earnings coming my way of about 5,000 euros a month. I've got, 20,000 euros in my bank account. I might already have a property in France, thanks to Adrian Leeds, so I don't have rental costs. Therefore, I'll be financially stable. I won't be a burden on the system. I won't be arriving at Charles de Gaulle Airport and then sleeping under a bridge that night. These are the various ways that we're trying to reassure them that we're going to be one of the good ones, that we're going to come into France and be financially stable and not become a burden on the system. And then we're in France. The status, as I was saying, is valid for 1 year. And so in the 2 to 4 months preceding its expiration, that's the time to start filing for the renewal. So that year 1 is the visa sticker in your passport. And so As of year 2, then you get a card, a residency permit card that's issued from the local prefecture. The prefecture is like the DMV of immigration, if the DMV was happy. Let's let's phrase it that way.
I like
Now,
that. That's great. The
no,
DMV immigration.
but
Yeah.
let's be honest, they're not happy at the prefecture. They're very unhappy to see you. So when you're taking, for example, your photo, I always love it in American passports, we're allowed to smile. And you know, I've got big American teeth. My smile fills my passport photo, but you have to look somber. You have to look like you are accused of murder on your photos that you're sharing with the French administration. That's how you know you're doing your photos right for filing at the consulate and with the prefecture. Once you're here in France and it's time to file the renewal, there's a good way of doing this and a bad way of doing this in terms of proving your financial stability. You still have to prove you've got finances, you've got your health coverage, you've got your housing. And you'd want to have, at this point in time, French documents. When you're filing from the US or from wherever you are, we're North American financial forum, so if you're filing from Canada, but the message applies across the globe, whether it's Australia, Lebanon, UK, what have you. You can show documents in English or in French because they're consular agents, they're living abroad, they know the value of a dollar, they know how to speak English. Once you're in France, they don't speak English, they feel very uncomfortable about their English, and they want to see things that are in euros. They don't know what the currency conversion rate is for a Hong Kong, you know, or, you know, from Lebanon or from America. They don't know that, they don't master that. And so we have to start seeing things from their perspective. And that's why I call my approach the silver platter approach. We want to give the documents to them on a silver platter such that it's so inherently easy for them to say yes to your application. France being the country where the national slogan is "C'est pas possible." So we always have to overcome their no's and push past those no's to get to that yes. Especially in Nice. So a lot of Adrian's activities in Paris, the other half is in Nice. The Paris prefecture is probably the nicest of the prefectures. The Nice prefecture is my least favorite prefecture. They can be really, real sticklers.
You know that makes no sense, right?
Tell me why. Because it should be the same or what?
Because in Nice, it's sunny and they're happy. And when you're on the street, everybody is happy. So it makes no sense that the Nice prefecture would be the most difficult to deal with.
I didn't know you guys were so happy down there. That's congratulations, you made it.
Ask Patty.
Yeah, I always like to joke that it's either that they're out on the patio drinking their cafe while the kids are stacking tall, or it could be that in Nice they vote 40% for Marine Le Pen, and the perception of what is a foreigner is different than in Paris. We've got a socialist mayor. But in any event, in the Nice prefecture, they're particularly strict. So like, let's say you're trying to file for the renewal of your visitor status, and you're like, well, I did my last year, I just showed my US bank statements, maybe I have an open bank account here in France. So let's just show 3 months of bank statements. And then how does the Nice prefecture reply? They go, great, but we don't know dollars and we don't know English. Have a sworn translation of every page you just shared with us. And maybe your bank statement is 4 pages long and there's 3 of them, and each sworn translation page costs €675. Then you're out a serious chunk of change. Whereas if you just listen to me right here, right now, you would get around that. So I recommend opening a French bank account, making a wire transfer from yourself, from the United States into France, and either in one lump sum of €17,000 or spread out over a course of months. And then you just show your French bank statements. And when you're doing the initial filing, they care about where your money is coming from. When you're doing the renewal filing, they stop caring where your money's coming from. You could be in the mafia for all they care. They just want to understand you've got money entering your French bank account. Could be coming from a US bank account, but that's not their problem. That's not on their desk. Their desk today is just looking at your money entering over the past 12 months. And if it's entering your French bank account, and if it's more than €70,000, and if it's in French, and if it's in euros, they're happy to see that. They can just check their box. I think on their side of things, it's less homework just to validate and renew you for another year than to try a way to kick you out of France. So they're always looking for a way to say yes to your application at this point. Most renewals, if they're filed on time, they're going to say yes. It's just a matter of time and processing. So it's up to us to serve them on that silver platter and make sure that they want to say yes. I'm going to do a quick pause because I usually don't like to speak too continually. Does Brian or Adrian, do you guys have any thoughts you want to chime in on?
I want to chime in on just one aspect because, for the requirements, part of it is having a place to live, right? And it can be a catch-22. But just so you know, we provide this for our clients. We can give them an attestation or a lease or something that will prove to them that they will have a place to live.
Mhm.
So I don't want anyone to worry about that. I joke that I have hundreds of people living with me. Okay. But so far it's been okay.
Yeah.
I have
and I
plenty
see.
of room.
Great. So I see there's already a lot of lovely questions. They're very diverse, the questions that I'm seeing in the so I'll save some of them for the end because I think I'm on a little bit of a flow, but we'll shift back into that for a second.
I
So
want to say something
please,
too
Patty.
about Brian, where I am thankful to have Brian as my financial advisor, because early in my time in France, I moved my investments to him. He suggested that I reprice everything in euros. And through his company, I was also able to get my investment statements in French.
Hmm.
So as a supplement to my French bank account statements to apply for my carte de résident, I also sent them my statements from Dunhill Financial in French, in euros. Fingers crossed.
That's good. Yeah, I think that because Adrian's never just Adrian by herself. There's a whole team around Adrian, and Adrian's team also relies on myself, on Jonathan Hadida and Benjamin Peake and Brian. So it's very very incestuous actually. We're all relying on each other. We're all each other's lawyers and attorneys.
I'm not sure I'd use that word incestuous.
Yeah.
Okay, but I
Next
have
time I'll use a better
noticed
word,
in
Adrian. I
I
apologize.
have noticed in the Q&A that there are a lot of questions that are off topic and have to do with taxes, which we're not going to talk about taxes today. Okay, just so everybody knows, we can talk about taxes another time, and we do all the time.
Yeah.
But just try to keep questions on topic.
Yeah, so on the financial impact of immigrants here in France, I think that's our best topic for today. So Adrian was already pitching that she has good contacts with French banks. I usually end up recommending my clients to go through BNP Paribas because you can set up the account before you get here in France. But I'm not. I've never heard great feedback of BNP Paribas, so I'm not.
I think they also require or sometimes require a very high deposit amount.
And that could be. I know that was the case for HSBC. I used to refer people to that too, but then HSBC is pulling out of the retail market, so we can't
Our
refer
banks
people
are
to
not
HSBC.
requiring. In fact, one of the questions I get all the time is how much money do we need to deposit in the French bank? And the truth is nothing. You can open a bank account with absolutely zero. Now you can't operate it with zero, but you can open it with zero.
Yeah. And so, Adrian, you're already mentioning the banking requirements of things. It's usually pretty hard to open the bank account, as you said, before you get here to France. Once you're here in France with a valid visa, you can walk into any bank and say, I'd like to open an account with you. I've got a visa. I've got the right to be here. They usually say yes. In these various Facebook groups of American expats in France, we like to complain amongst ourselves. But in short, if you walk into one, Société Générale, and they refuse you, you walk back out, you go 60 meters, you go into Crédit Agricole, or I'm with Banque Populaire. I don't love them, they don't love me, but we work together. So then having that bank account then is a very French way of proceeding. Patty and I were discussing this last week about how it can be considered a sign of integration. I had once a prefecture agent in front of me, and she was saying, maybe for that first year they haven't opened a bank account, but for that second year, I really look for it because it's a sign they're integrating into French culture. So I was saying earlier on about French mindset, they're always projecting themselves onto others. In France, their mindset is, I will have a French bank account with my carte bleue, my debit card to pay for whatever. So these foreigners should be doing that too. So that's part of the challenge that we're seeing with these renewals at the prefecture. They want you to be banking in France because that's how they would be doing things. It kind of blows their mind for an American to show up with a credit card and pay for things with their American card while they're living here in France on a long stay visa. And so then I've got plenty of clients who maybe we get to that first renewal and they say, oh, well, I didn't do French banking. I'm just using my American accounts and my American, stock portfolio. And that's not very French looking. And our goal, kind of like the French whisper, we have like a horse whisper. We have to figure out how to do things along the way that they want it to be done. And the best way, way to make your life simple and the prefecture agent's life simple is to have French accounts, as I've been saying.
Well, you have to have one to rent. You have to have a French bank account to rent an apartment. You have to have a French bank account to buy a property and to have a telephone. I mean, it's that simple.
And if you ever work in France as an entrepreneur or an employee, you also have to have a French bank account to get paid and to issue invoices. Right. So to me, the world turns around having a French bank. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear.
French bank account and use it.
Yeah.
That's the other,
Yeah,
yeah.
having
half
enough
the
money
unused-
entering it.
Yeah.
I don't
Mhm.
care if you're buying your French Starbucks with that account, but so long as there's money entering the account, that makes me happy. Now, I'd be curious for your guys' opinion on online banking. I don't love online banking. I generally try to recommend my clients to get the brick and mortar banks because the French oftentimes don't know what to do with these online banks, or sometimes these online banks have a RIB, an IBAN that's not even French, but maybe from a different EU country. And yeah, what are your
I
thoughts?
don't think there's a French fintech at this point in time. We essentially they're all either UK, Channel Islands, or there's one that's German based, but I don't think there's a French based one.
I think
And
Revolut has French.
They
It does.
Wise may now.
they do have a French IBAN, but they're not considered a French bank. They don't have a banking license.
Bunk,
They're considered
Wow.
N26 is German. Bunk is from
Right.
where? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So they're
I mean, it may work to pay bills, but it's not going to pass the test at the prefecture.
Yeah, it could very well not pass the test. Whereas if you
Mhm.
have the valid visa and you have the right to open a bank account, just go ahead and do it that way.
Absolutely.
I don't want us to lose our mind on like have like a 10-minute bank talk, but maybe that's helpful. So keeping the ball rolling. For long-term integration, there's the short to medium term is being on this visitor status or some other category. Long-term, after 5 years presence, you can start to aim for a better category. So there's the 10-year card and there's naturalization. The 10-year card's really good because yeah, it lets you work here in France. It lets you kind of work in any manner that you'd like. In naturalization, by the way, I haven't told either of you, any of you yet, but I got French nationality as of 3 weeks ago. So I am
Oh,
now French
congratulations.
citizen.
Woohoo.
Yeah. So my passport request is in the books with the local town hall, and that'll come through in December. But I want to talk about the financial side of things for the 10-year card and for naturalization. So for both of these situations, they want you to start filing taxes in France. That's better positioned for one of our tax friends like Jonathan Adida or Benjamin Peake to talk about. But in short, the way that Jonathan's pitched to me is that there's the center of your tax residency. It's a multi-factor test. Where's your primary address? Where are you spending more than half the year? Where do you intend to file taxes? Where's your job located? Where's your spouse located? And if you're spending more than half the year, in short, you should eventually start filing taxes in France. They want this for the 10-year card. They want this for naturalization. So then it's a matter, and this is of course where you want to speak to a tax expert and make sure you're getting sound advice, and not just from me. I'm just the visa guy. To be filing your tax declarations here in France, and then you could very well be on your track for the 10-year card. And also for naturalization, they require 3 years of tax returns. Go for
I'll
it.
adjust one thing in there. Most of the lawyers and accountants talk about 6 months and a day. But the actual rule in the books states where you lay your head and where you do your work. So you could actually dispute it and spend most of your time in France. But if your house is back in the States and you just have a pied à terre in France and your company's back in the States and you just happen to be there on vacation because you like the food and wine better, you can actually dispute that you're still resident in the States. You're just spending more time in France. But most of the accountants will go based on that 6 months and a day.
Yeah, I know at least 2 accountants, including Jonathan, that explained I don't want to get too far into this because I'm not the right guy to explain it in profondeur, but that it could be even up to 243 days, which is 2 months more than 183 days, and you could still manage to avoid triggering tax residency. And that has to do with how they're counting each year of the past 3 years with an algorithm, how much is the value of each day spent in America or France. The easiest way to wrap our head around is say where you're spending more than half the year. And if you speak with one of the tax experts, there's a more complex way of getting the answer to that too. Yeah. So then I might start trying to wrap up my side of the spiel so we can get to some of the questions. I'll end with the question: will French laws change anytime soon? Macron is au pouvoir. He's in power. He does not have a majority in parliament. He lost that in 2022. So he has to make deals with anybody to get past any law. He started this, they call it a projet de loi, a bill, this early this year. That was a mix of, cracking down with giving a path to legalization, basically amnesty for those industries where they can't find enough workers, whether they're French or non-French. And then they just passed this on to the Senate this past month. The Senate is filled with people that are Républicains, and they are much more farther to the right. And they did a real number on it, filling it full of amendments that Macron and his team wouldn't really accept. And now they sent it back to the Assemblée Nationale, shortly sent it through to the Assemblée Nationale to then do more tweaks and amendments and such. I'm not sure this bill's going anywhere because Macron needs to make a deal to pass his bills. And Macron might not accept the rightward tilt that the Republicans are putting on this, but they are maybe his best partner in the Assemblée Nationale. So it remains to be seen what's happening. I've got a good feeling that nothing's going to change much between now and 2027. 2027 is the next French elections. There is currently 577 members of parliament. 88 are from the Marine Le Pen arc of things. They used to be called Front National, now it's the Rassemblement National. So she can't do much by way of changing the laws. Even if she got the presidency in 2027, she'll still have to have some kind of voice in the parliament to make any major changes. And if Macron, who can't make any changes, we'll see what Le Pen could do. So I kind of foresee that immigration is going to be more or less the same path, which is to say relatively open for Americans who want to retire to France, who want to be in France teleworking, that the pathway is open towards France.
Don't they call it the golden passport?
We don't have a golden passport in France.
I was told when I was at the prefecture, I was told by one of the clerks that they call the American passport the golden passport. In other words, it gets you in the door.
Yeah, I believe that, and I see that too. My immigration consultations often take the form of an immigration confessional, where people tell me their immigration sins. Very often it's a matter about overstaying and like, I've been here for too long. I want to live here because I've got a property here. Now what do I do? And the reality, as you said, Adrian, is that in my experience, they're not that hard. They don't come down that hard on Americans who've overstayed, who are then willing to leave France, file for a visa, and then re-enter France legally. That from the real cases I've seen, they could get punished at the airport and aren't yet getting punished as hard as they could be at the airport when they leave.
Daniel, you and I both know several people who have been here as many as 30 years without a visa. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a very different situation then when they came, right? And they're trying to get, not naturalized, but in good stead. They're trying to get They're trying to get their proper papers. And I think you're right. They're not going to come down too hard. Those people have been contributing to society all these years, even though they've actually been here illegally.
Yeah. So I'm taking a look at some of these questions that we're receiving here on the question box. And there's some interesting ones. So maybe we could start to take a look at that. Adrian, can you remind me, are we on for an hour today?
Well, yeah, we have 20 minutes.
Okay. There was a question that you probably get all the time, Adrian, about do I have to have a visa or residency permit to own property in France? And the answer is that these two things are separated out, that you can buy property.
One has nothing to do with the other.
Right. And it's more so a question of enjoyment. If you want to spend more than 90 days in France at a time, then you need a visa. And a long stay visitor visa is the best way to enter France. Have the wine and the cheese and the French quality of life without having to necessarily enter the French workforce and have a French employer or have French clients. So yeah, that's to your advantage. And then if you already have property in France, whether it's a lease or a property in your name, then that's one of the things you can check off the to-do list for when you file for the visa, because they want to understand what's your housing going to be in France. And if you already have your housing lined up in France, then you can just show that. It's the property deed, you show the electricity bill in your name, and they're happy to have you.
I see a good question. Yeah. It says they heard they can only, with a long stay visa, they can only be out of France for 3 months a year. That's not true, right?
That's not true, no. So I say there's two ways of doing this visitor visa: 2 feet firmly in France or 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So for this 1 foot in, 1 foot out route, you could be in this visitor status indefinitely, year in, year out, for here on out. And there's no minimum requirement that they ask for when you're filing the renewals. If you're aiming for that 10-year card, though, they want you to be mostly in France. They want that 2 feet planted in France. They want you filing French taxes. And they state no more than 10 months, so minimum 10 months per year in France. Let me reframe that sentence. No more than 10 months spent outside of France over the past 5 years. So that works out to roughly 2 months per year outside of France on average. And so they don't even apply that rule very strictly. I went to the prefecture with a retired priest who spent 2.5 months every year in America, and he still walked out of there with a 10-year card. So The general rule is to be mostly in France if you want to aim for that 10-year card, if you want to aim for naturalization. Otherwise, if you feel the need to be most of the year in France, or if you want to spend half the year in France, if you've got family to take care of in America or what have you, you don't have to spend a minimum amount of time in France to continue to qualify for this visa. They're talking about that in the Senate. That was one of the proposals, was to require a minimum 6 months per year in France. But we'll see if they make any changes to the law.
Several people have also asked about the ability to get an artist visa for like a musician, or other professions of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would frame it as there's basically 4 ways of entering France. Through the visitor status, which we've done a good job talking about today, through the student route, which is usually not the profile of Adrian's clients, through a relationship, or through work as an employee or work as an entrepreneur. So that's a little bit more in that latter bucket. I would say that in the profile of my clients, about half are on this visitor status, and the other half are what have you. They're spouse of a French national, spouse of an EU national. They are an entrepreneur, they're an artist. So for an artist, it can actually be a relatively challenging category to qualify for. You have to prove that you have art, that you can demonstrate your artistry, and that you're earning your money off of your art, like principally earning money off of your art. So for those that are occasionally painting, that might not be the best fit, especially if you're just painting in your own home. Maybe that visitor status is actually a better fit. Versus if you're making your money as a photographer or as a fashion designer or something like that, and you could put together a really solid profile, then go for it. My last artist finding last month, he makes puzzles, and they're selling, in Galerie Lafayette, and they're, doing well. And so he, with his art as a puzzle maker, got the artist visa. So now he's here in France. So
Okay, so
it can
what
really be case by case.
qualifies? So what categories qualify? So artist, musician, what else? Photographer?
Yeah, anyway, anything that's considered a performing arts could be. So we've got it in for some actors
Writer?
as well. Writer, it can be challenging. I got one of my clients who's a writer, who had the reason to be in France. He was able to get it. Because usually when you're a writer, you're kind of like that one character from Love Actually. You can put your typewriter anywhere and sit on the edge of a lake. And then if you're selling it to your US edition, your US editor, then you don't necessarily need to have work authorization. They want to have a nexus to France. Why France in particular? And that goes for if you're an entrepreneur or artist. You need to have a reason to be working in France. And so for that one writer client, he was working on a project about a major, French revolutionary figure. And so he needed to be here to look in the archives, the National Library, and so forth. So you need to give them a reason for France. One of my photographers had a cool project that was, he likes cyclists and fashion, and he combined it to make a book about the fashion of cyclists in Paris. And that's like a pitch. That's a project for why he needed to be in France. So it really depends on the case by case. And if it's not artistry per se, it can still be entrepreneurship. There's the entrepreneur visa that can be a really good way to enter France as well.
Does that require an investment?
No, there's actually 3 different types of entrepreneur visa. There's the regular entrepreneur liberal profession, and that's my preferred route. If you want to bring in your family, there's the talent passport corporate creation, and that one's the same thing, but requires a 30,000 euro investment. And then there's the talent passport investor, which requires 300,000 euros investment. And I'd never recommend that one, but that's too much of a risk to put 300,000 euros into a French bank account and say, please give me a visa now. Like, what if they said, no, I don't like that one. I think the stakes are too high. I prefer the talent passport corporate creation or the entrepreneur status.
Okay.
George W. said there was no such word in French as entrepreneur.
It's a French word.
I know it's a Bushism. That's what. Oh boy!
Oh, George W. Bush said that.
Come on, Daniel.
Oh yeah, those are the good days having Bushism and thinking that was the worst of it.
I miss George W.
That's a different financial forum.
We never thought we were going to say that.
Absolutely not. But I really miss him. But I like his artistry. Maybe, Daniel, you should get George W. Bush an artist visa over to France.
Well, Barbara Streisand said this morning that if Trump gets reelected, she's moving abroad. And then I looked into it. I said, where does she say she wants to move to? And she said, I like England. And I thought, oh, that would have been a great LinkedIn post to try to become Barbara Streisand's lawyer. Let's see. So there are some questions about pension and Social Security. From what I've heard, like, do they need to be paid into the French bank account, or can that stay in the US bank account? That's more of like a financial person question. I would say I'm perfectly happy with you being paid into the US account. So whether you're receiving money as a US employee or receiving US pension, I'm perfectly fine for that to stay on the US side. and just make wire transfers into your French account. Because as I said before, the French don't care where the money's coming from, just that you have enough financial stability, that you're not going to become a burden on the system. And that's the win-win, that you're here in France, you're shopping at Monoprix without taking a job at Monoprix. That's the
But
kind of person they want.
I'll add to that, because you can have your Social Security sent directly to your French bank account, and you will get the best rate of exchange. But you get the best rate of exchange at the time. So if you've sent it to your US account, then you can decide when to send it at what rate of exchange, and you have a lot more control. So you can take advantage of the rate of exchange if you're smart about it. So I don't think that having it sent directly in is a good idea.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement then. There's a question about the pros and the cons for that long-term route, getting 10-year card versus getting naturalization. I see no downside to getting naturalization, and only advantages, because you don't have to give up your US nationality or Canadian nationality. The 10-year card works best for my clients that want to keep their financial center of interest outside of France. So I did a consultation earlier today with a gentleman from Abu Dhabi who makes a lot of money there and not a lot of money in France. And for naturalization's sake, he's going to have the center of his economic interest in France. So they don't want any pull factors. They don't want you to become French and then move off to LA or Dubai because your money is there. They want you to have your job be in France, your spouse be in France, and the center of your earnings being in France. So it could very well be that 10-year card is more interesting because they don't require having the center of your economic interest in France. It lets you be here and work here and stay here in France without necessarily having to go full hog and have your earnings coming from France.
The only thing you're missing really is the ability to vote.
Yeah, I say there's three major differences between the 10-year card and naturalization. Being able to vote, as you just said, having a permanent attachment to France and being able to pass it on to your kids, and getting in the good line at the airport, which is what we're all after. So other than that, in the day-to-day, your life on the 10-year card or naturalization will feel the same. You have the right to work, you have the right to come and go as you please, and so forth. There's a question about working remotely. I don't want to get myself in too hot water because this can be considered a legal gray area. What I will say is that the French consulate, the French prefecture, and the French Ministry of the Interior, which controls immigration in France, have stated in writing that they authorize teleworking on the visitor status. There is not, however, a national law about teleworking internationally. And this is ever slightly in conflict with what French tax law says, which is to say, wherever you geographically are, you should be filing your social charges there in France. So because there's this tension, when we're having 100 participants on a Zoom call, I try not to be too generic or too broad in my statements. I prefer to save that for the consultations, because we could spend another 20 minutes talking about that, and I don't think you want to.
Okay, I see several questions related to getting Puma healthcare, French healthcare. I'm sure people want to know about that.
Yes. So Puma, as you know, universal, as Adrian knows, not everyone that's listening, obviously you're here to learn. Puma is the universal coverage. It's part of CPAM, which is the system in France of French public healthcare. They have this crazy notion that healthcare is a human right, and that anyone that's living here in France can benefit from French public healthcare. That's what the Code de Sécurité Sociale says, that anyone living in France for more than 90 days can benefit from the system. So that includes the visitor status. This used to be ambiguous. I went to the prefecture a couple of years back and I asked two agents sitting across the way from each other. I said, can my client on the visitor status get French public healthcare? And they said, bien sûr que oui. They're living in France, anyone can get this. And the other agent said, bien sûr que no. How are they paying for this? We don't want freeloaders. When they moved the visitor renewals online, they've been universally accepting French public healthcare as proof of health insurance. So that kind of resolved the question. The answer is that then you are supposed to get a bill in December that says how much did you earn globally, and we'll charge you a certain small percentage of that. I've never seen it more than 8,000 euros, but it's usually a couple thousand euros to pay for it. And that's called CSM. I spoke this morning with one of my Social Security lawyer friends, and I asked him, Patty mentioned to me the other day that a lot of people are never getting these bills. Can we just walk into the office and volunteer to pay? And he said, maybe I should do a direct quote. It's fine. I'll paraphrase what he said, that there's a lot of things that are gratuit en France, and that this may be one of them. There's no way to make a voluntary contribution to French public health care. I think this is one of these areas. I think there's a bit of a gap here, that we get Americans who might be wealthy, who are coming in retirement age, who might need the healthcare system, who are not getting, when they're doing the calculus of this assiette, the amount that you have to contribute to it, they don't take into consideration pension. And so it could very well look like your earnings are low then. So it's almost like a catch-22 in Americans' favors, where you can benefit from the system and you're not paying that much to get healthcare in France. So I think they need to fix that kink out at some point soon.
So,
But in the meantime, it's in the interest of Americans.
Daniel, I have to think it's because of the tax treaty, and American pension and Social Security income isn't taxable in France. So these so-called wealthy Americans aren't getting charged for the healthcare because they're not paying any taxes. They don't have any taxable income in France.
Or it could be, as you were saying, mentioning the tax treaty, maybe that because it's the same benefit allotted to French nationals that are retiring to America, maybe there's a bilateral, reciprocal manner that they can benefit. I'm not so sure because healthcare is not necessarily as given away and as it is in France, as it is in America.
You know, I had this conversation with a friend very recently because she was absolutely shocked. She's an American living in France for 50 years, and she was shocked that France would provide free healthcare, basically, okay, to, you know, on a visitor visa. And I said, but I pay an enormous amount in URSAF. I pay an enormous amount of Social Security as a worker bee, but I don't care because I'm so happy that everyone has health care, that the healthcare system is so good that it costs me so little money in effect, okay, in spite of the Social Security, that's just the way it is, and I agree with it. So, and I think that's true for everyone who's out there working and paying their taxes.
And I think, Adrian, when we're Americans moving to France, it's a bit of a self-selecting crowd that we like this idea. Like, so we're both entrepreneurs. We're both paying, French taxes. On our invoices, there's the value added tax 20%. There's the social charge that we're paying, which might be 21% as a micro entrepreneur, 40% as a regular company structure, and then we're paying income tax, which might be 20%. So all these little pieces are getting added up, and we're paying for the system. But I believe in the system. I like this strong social safety net. And so I like the fact that, we're able to, if we're doing well financially, we're able to contribute to that. So that's my own point of view.
Well, I completely agree with that, but it was surprising to me, as you know, that I was sitting there with an American who has lived here 50 years and actually wanted to be on the US capitalist system where she wouldn't have had healthcare at all. So I don't know. What can I say? I think it's wonderful.
Flip side, I have a French friend who was thrilled to know I had healthcare. Being here on a visitor status, she was really concerned about me. And she was thrilled to know I could get healthcare.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. So some of your clients, Adrian, have like an EU spouse. That's a category that's called spouse of an EU national residency permit. That's been my status up until I naturalized a couple weeks ago. And it's a good 5-year status. It's the one category out of all of the 30 that lets you just fly into France like a tourist, arrive in France. Within the first 90 days, you contact the local prefecture and you request a residency permit. And that's done online. So that is a more fluid way of moving to France. It can be. That category is also sometimes hard to qualify for. It depends on how good the prefecture agent is reviewing your case file. So then that's good. That's good.
I see someone asking about French language requirements for getting a long stay visa.
There's currently no requirements for the first 5 years. You don't have any level of French. And the idea is once you hear, you start taking French classes, you get good at French, you chat your neighbors and the boulanger and so forth, and you get good at French. For the 10-year card, they want to see a level of A2, which is advanced beginner French. For naturalization, they want to see a level of B1, which is lower intermediate. In the French Parliament, they're talking about increasing the levels to get a multi-year card or to renew your card, but we're not there yet. And I frankly don't see that happening anytime soon.
Okay. Hey, I was so excited. I passed my my French exam. That was such a big deal for naturalization.
You were so worried about it too, Adrian, but you've been here long enough that you got to think that your French is good enough to qualify you for naturalization.
Well, it actually was a piece of cake, but I was very worried. Yes, it was c'était du gâteau. Okay.
And now your case file will pass comme une lettre à la poste, as they say in French. It'll go like a letter in the post office.
Hope so.
But wait,
So
if you do your driver's test later on, that has to be in French, right? I don't think you have the
There's-
option to do that.
there's two things to say about the driver's side of things. If you're moving to France, you've got the first 12 months where you're allowed to exchange your driver's license with certain states. There's 13 states, mostly on the eastern seaboard, nothing on the west coast, to exchange a Floridian driver's license for a French driver's license. They actually expect you to render your Floridian driver's license as if you're never going to drive in America again. But what a lot of my clients end up doing is just telling the DMV they lost their driver's license and they ask for a new one.
exactly, good
But
trick.
there's but I have to be careful, Adrian, whenever we've got these recorded meetings and then I'm giving all my sneaky pitches. That's not my role as the lawyer. My role as the lawyer is to tell you what to do correctly. So there's only 13 states that qualify. California does not. New York does not. So for all those folks, if you want to drive past those first 12 months of arrival, you have to sit for the French driver's license test. And there's one driver's ed school that I know of that's outside of Paris. Otherwise, there might be some driver's English speaking schools that are around, but the test itself, Brian, as you said, it should be still in French.
Trop difficile.
Yeah.
I need
I
to
see
know
one
his gauche plot.
yeah, I see one question about digital nomads. I'm happy to answer, but I want to throw it back over to Adrian and Brian in case you guys wanted to round things out at the end of our discussion today.
I'm just looking through some of the questions. Patty, do you see any questions that you think we should actually address?
I've been answering some within the Q&A.
Okay.
I was liking the one that Daniel just mentioned about the digital nomad.
Yeah, let's go there. So I actually think that France, is my own personal opinion, is the most open country to digital nomads because there's a lot of states that have this digital nomad visa, like Estonia or Portugal, and they're oftentimes 1 year and not renewable, versus France, which, as we said earlier on, the French consulate in the prefecture have confirmed in writing that one can telework for on this visitor status, and one can renew this visitor status. And then when you're filing the renewals, they don't ask you for where your money's coming from, just that you have enough money. So I think this is one of the best ways to be a digital nomad and have Europe. So my law firm, I think, really blossomed when COVID struck, following COVID, that all these Americans realized, well, I could work from my couch. So this could be anywhere in the world. So why not have my couch be a canapé and have that canapé be located in France? And so that's why I think I have so many of my clients are on this visitor status. They're showing they've got financial stability, coming from the UK, coming from the US on their remote work, and then they move here to France. After 5 years, they get the 10-year card. They can start working locally. They can start to file for naturalization. So a lot of the doors are open to them.
We are seeing a tremendous number of really young people coming over who they couldn't have done this 5 years ago. They couldn't have done this, and now they can. So it's really been it's been fantastic. In looking at some of these questions, one person has asked, which banks do we recommend for loans to acquire property? And the truth is that very few banks are lending money to Americans at this stage. And the best way is to go through our broker who can, because the banks will lend money depending on where the property is. So it's different banks for different parts of the country.
I'll chime in, Adrian, to say that I could not get any French bank in all of France to give us a loan for our property. So my wife and I, she was a German on a Belgian, she still is German, on a Belgian contract. I was only working for 2 years at the time what we were buying, and they wanted to see 3 years of entrepreneurship in order for a French bank to accept us. So we had to go through my wife's hometown German bank in order to get our loan. And so, yeah, it is a real frustrator. I don't feel like the banks necessarily smile.
Well, next time you're going to come to me.
Yeah, next time. I think we found our forever home, but if there is another house, I'll come running to Adrian.
Yeah, because we're not always successful, but we do have brokers who can do this to a point. It's not easy though. Not easy.
And Adrian, you find that it's easier for the clients paying in cash rather than going through the banks to get, if they can afford to do so, to get their to buy the properties in France?
It's only easier because the seller is more likely to accept their offer if there's no contingency for a loan. So if they can pay cash, then they can offer cash. That does not preclude them from getting a mortgage or taking a line of credit on the US side, which Brian can help them with.
But then at the same time, there's two considerations to having a mortgage that are really helpful. First of all, it is still cheaper to borrow in Europe than it is in the United States.
True.
And therefore, the cost to borrow makes it accretive to potentially keep your investments versus sell them, like here in the UK or in the US, where mortgages have gotten to be much more expensive. And secondarily, for those temporary individuals, the people that are not going to actually pass away as residents in France, but have a property in France, having that mortgage actually reduces their French estate by that amount.
And therefore the wealth tax.
Exactly. So there are considerations. It might be a pain for this year. It probably will be a pain for a good part of next year. But as the banks stabilize, we'd expect them to start reissuing mortgages. It's just, when are the banks going to really stabilize, and when are interest rates going to be flattening out? With inflation numbers coming in like they did yesterday, hopefully that day is sooner than later.
So on that positive note, because I hear that the market is up, right, Brian?
We've had a good week, yes.
Yes, okay. Well, so is the rate of exchange. The rate of exchange just got a little bit worse for dollars to euros, but the market went up, so that's good. It is 8:01, and so it's time for us to say so long. And we want to thank everyone for being here. We want to certainly thank Daniel for all this fantastic information, and Brian and Patty for monitoring things. And we will be here again next year, but we're not sure exactly when the forums are going to take place. So we will let you know. Just stay tuned to our newsletters and our promos for upcoming forums. So thank you all again for participating, and look for the recording that will be probably issued within the next couple of days, and you'll have a chance to watch it again. Goodbye,
Thank
everyone.
you so much,
Thank
Adrian.
you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
And happy Thanksgiving to everybody, the original immigration holiday.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We're actually having a big dinner in Nice. So to anyone who wants to join us on Thanksgiving Day for Thanksgiving, we have only a handful of seats left, and they need to email Patty at info@adrianleeds.com as quickly as possible.
Tomorrow's the deadline.
Yes, Doris, as quickly as possible. Okay, bye everyone. Have a great
Everybody,
holiday.
thank you. Bye-bye.